please.
Together twice.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if you can have the record show that all 7 commissioners are present. A couple things before we actually get into the agenda. First of all, just to let anybody know that may have shown up for it, we were supposed to have a special meeting today at 3 o'clock. That meeting was canceled. And additional to that, one of the items on the agenda was canceled, and that was, I believe it was B on old business. The old B on old business was canceled. But the agenda has been amended, as you can see. And then one last thing, I've had a request to bring the new business up to the first discussion of right before old business, if that's okay with the commissioners.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. With that,
Just clarification, it's before old business?
yes, right before old business, yeah.
Thank you, yes.
With that, if we can, there's no correspondence. I'm going to move down to consider a vote of the commissioners to accept the consent agenda, which is the following. As far as minutes go, September 19th and September 20th, the executive sessions, that's 2. September 19th, December 20th, special meetings, that's 2 more. And then finally, 2 workshops, March 5th, 2018, May 7th, 2018. If we can get a motion and a second to approve those.
Some of these meetings were before Ed and I joined. So you have to do the December, I guess, I don't know how you want to do it, but anyway.
But just the March and the May, I would think, but you can just,
And,
Well, the executive session on September 19th was also before
oh, that
us.
was before, okay.
yeah, and Mayor, I was not up here in March and May of 2018.
All right, well, you know what? We can go down minute by minute. All right, why don't we start with September 19th, executive session, a motion and a second.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the executive session, September 19th, 2019. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain,
Opposed? Abstain?
abstain.
Aye.
Okay.
Or abstain.
Same thing, executive session, December 20th, 2019. If I can get a motion and a second to
Move
approve.
approval?
Second,
We have a motion and a second to approve December 20th executive session minutes. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Down to special meetings held on September 19th, 2019. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the special meeting September 19th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
I abstain.
Okay. And then special meeting December 20th, 2019. If I can get a motion and a second.
Move approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the special meeting December 20th, 2019. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Down to workshop, March 5th, 2018 minutes. Motion and a second, please.
Actually, I wasn't there for that either.
Okay.
We weren't on board yet. So I think it's only.
March 5th.
I don't know that you have enough people
So
here.
4 of the 7 of us were not here
Yes, so,
for that one or the May 7.
You can still proceed with those who were there. It's called the rule of necessity. When you can't have a quorum, you can take the action on it, so.
Okay.
Okay. If I can get a motion and a second from the other 2 that were here?
That would be Lisa.
Lisa?
So moved?
Yeah.
And was Steve here?
No,
No.
no.
Oh, there's only 2.
You're allowed to second?
I will second it.
only 2 here in May of
We have a motion and a second to approve the workshop meeting, March 5th, 2018. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Talk amongst yourselves.
And then the final set is the workshop minutes held May 7th, 2018. If I can get a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the workshop minutes, meeting, May 7th, 2018. All in favor?
December 7th. No, December 7th.
No, it's
No,
May
May
7th.
7th.
May 7th.
Oh, no, we weren't here, I'm sorry. I
May
thought you said
7th of
December.
18.
I'm looking at the
Same
wrong-
too, yeah.
Same two. So Lisa, you made a motion? Can you make a motion?
So moved.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you for that thing. That's education. We can move right into the city manager's report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one street aid expenditure in the amount of $9,146.03 to Delmarva Power for streetlights.
If we can get a motion and a
I
second
move
to
to
approve.
approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve street aid expenditures in the amount of $9,146.03. Any further discussion? Not? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The North Shores meter replacement program will begin next week on Tuesday, and affected property owners will be notified in advance. ADEL will start mobilizing in the next several weeks for the paving program. The concrete curb and sidewalk work will be performed first before resurfacing the streets, and also affected property owners will be notified in advance. The paving locations are Philadelphia Street from Scarborough Avenue to King Charles Avenue, and 3rd Street from Lake Avenue to Columbia Avenue. The city will hold a presentation, a public presentation for the Lake Avenue Streetscape Phase 2 Improvements Project on Monday, January 27th, beginning at 10 a.m. Right here in the Commissioner's Room, and it will be live streamed. Purpose of the presentation is to provide an opportunity for the public to review and discuss the plans for the proposed improvements for Lake Avenue. The Rehoboth Art League will have a winter exhibition beginning on Wednesday, January 22nd, next week from 5 to 6 p.m. And this year's 2020 members juried exhibition showcase at City Hall will focus on seasons and will include the 4 district times of the year, along with any scenes, events, or activities associated with that. Clear Space Theater has reached an agreement with the city to occupy the convention center starting in the 2021 season, beginning in January of 2021. The theater's lease is expiring December 31, 2020, at the end of this year. And the city collaborated with Clear Space Theater on a mutually beneficial leasing agreement of the convention center. So we're happy to announce that we've been working with them and transitioning into that for them, working collaboratively for the arts.
City Manager, on that topic, because it's been scrutinized a little bit about, and many FOIA requests have been submitted regarding Clear Space, could you just go into a little bit more detail about the mutually beneficial lease agreement and what that entails?
Certainly. So the Clear Space has been, they came to me about approximately a year ago, asking if it would be possible to look at renting the convention center space. Certainly, I said, you know, this is an important program for not only the community, but for the arts and the focus on the programs that we want to bring forward here. Stephen Perry is the individual from the staff member who coordinates and actually is responsible for the schedule in the convention center room. And Mr. Perry worked long and hard and working with those groups that return every year. We have over 15 of them that are actual annual returnees to project what they would be needing in 2021. So when we were satisfied with that schedule, then we filled Clear Space in, and they were able to come up with about 143 days that they will need the convention center for all of their live performances, for their practices. They're showcasing some educational events. These would be both some during the day, some in the evening, 7 days a week, not in a row, but Monday and through the weekend. We settled on a cost for that. I think, it was a fair cost based on their nonprofit status, and they'll be beginning that starting, I believe it's the second week in January, 2021.
Excellent, and thank you for being diligent in getting the repeat users back. Thank you.
City Hall will be closed on Monday for an observance of Martin Luther King Day, and there will be no residential trash pickup on January 20th, but citywide trash will continue on Tuesday, January 21st. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Could you come up to the microphone, please, and make it brief, please?
Walter Birmingham, 123 Hennepin Avenue. The subject came up last year. We didn't hear it publicly, and now it comes out. How much money for ClearSpace?
They're leasing the convention center for $85,000.
Thank you very much. I do believe that's a significant item that's left out of your report. Thank you.
Anything, City Solicitor?
The only thing I'll mention is on your agenda at 13B, which is the discussion regarding gross floor area. You might have noticed on the postings this month that there's no Board of Adjustment meeting or hearing this month, partly because of your discussion here. Some of the legislation you'll be considering could resolve one of the Board of Adjustment applications that are pending. So if you were wondering why there's no Board of Adjustment hearing this month, that's why.
Great. Thank you.
City Solicitor, just one question on that. A previous decision, I think by this time, there would have had to been an action taken for them to retain any legal rights to appeal to the Board of Adjustments decision.
Right,
Has
so
that been taken?
There's two of them pending. One of them, trying to think it through, because the time for them to file an appeal to Superior Court doesn't start until a written decision is issued from the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, so
And
you were saying that the written decisions have not been
I
made?
think that's correct.
Okay.
That
All
neither
right.
of them gotten written
That
decisions
answers
yet.
my question. Thank you.
Okay. Go down the list. See somebody from the Planning Commission. Did you want to say something, Mr. Perry? If you wouldn't mind over there, please.
Rick Perry, 46 Pennsylvania Avenue, and Chair of the Planning Commission. Thank you for giving me a brief moment to talk with you about what the Planning Commission has been up to. We have been working very hard, every single member of the Planning Commission, to move forward our CDP as quickly as possible. At our last meeting a week ago, we ended up with every single commissioner volunteering to be a lead or a co-lead on the 5 topics that we have identified for workshops. So we are working very hard to bring this forward as quickly as possible. We will have on the 24th and 27th of this month 1.5 to 2 hour meetings with each of the leads and co-leads, along with Debbie File, our consultant, and Jeff Trunzo, our vice chair, at which time we will map out our plans and flesh out the agenda for each of those workshops. Our current intention is to hold the workshops between March 21st and April 4th. Those will be on Saturdays, and hopefully we will be able to cover 2 topics each Saturday, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, so people will have the opportunity to select which workshops they want to attend. We are looking forward to bringing in outside independent experts and getting participation not only from the citizens, businesses, and organizations within the city, but also bringing in outside experts from beyond the city limits. I think those workshops will be informative, interesting, and will be a big help to the Planning Commission in terms of its responsibilities for the CDP, as well as to the Board of Commissioners, as they have final approval over whatever we do. That pretty much concludes what, and we are also embarking upon putting together a very aggressive public relations program to ensure that we get out the information about these workshops, to encourage the maximum amount of participation that we can. We're going to be working with the communications director in the city, working with other organizations such as Main Street Chamber of Commerce and others to ensure that we get maximum communication. I know when Commissioner Gay was on the Planning Commission and we were doing the surveys, she was very active in going out to a number of organizations, including RBHA and others, to ensure that we got as much input on those as possible. We intend to do that and more as we lead up to these workshops. I do want to say one other thing, just briefly, because I was watching this morning's budget workshop, and one thing bothered me a little bit, and that was the issue of how long it's going to take to get our city code revised. And while I have my personal views on this, I think I can also safely say that from the standpoint of the planning commissioners, I think to a person we believe it's an urgent need. I was somewhat shocked to hear that it may take years to get this accomplished. I've told the mayor previously and some other folks that my first year in law school, my intern job was to work in the law department of the second largest city in Massachusetts. And my responsibilities were to work with a 9-member city council to completely review and rewrite every single ordinance of the city. I accomplished that in 1 year. And so I am troubled, particularly given the issues that the planning commissioners have identified as problematic in the code, that we can't place greater urgency on getting this done. I think a couple of years is going to adversely affect the progress here in the city and our economic vitality. Just my views.
Rick,
Thank you.
what are you doing for the next year?
Well, at least until October or so, I'm sharing the planning commission.
Actually,
That
I
was a
have
great
I have a
update.
Thank
couple
you, Rick.
quick questions. I have a question about the workshops, though, and thank you. Yeah, you're right. I did try to get as much publicity out as possible. And so one concern I have, and I think the format's great. I listened to the meeting, and I know you were going to be having it in the convention center, right?
Yes.
Where people can go and talk one-on-one.
Right.
And I've heard Debbie File, a consultant, say in the past that, a lot of people don't want to stand up at a meeting and speak, and there's real value in those kind of workshops. I agree with that. I'm mildly concerned about the time of year, maybe not to April, but certainly any time in March, about how many people are going to be here. But more importantly, I also think there's value in having meetings, and maybe you're already planning this, this is a question, not a statement. There's value in having meetings in this room, not only because they're recorded and people who aren't here can watch them, but more importantly, there's interaction. And somebody gets up to speak and it spurs somebody else to think of something and it stimulates conversation. And I guess I wonder, do you have those built into the plan after?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
our plan is to get feedback. We expect every planning commissioner to attend these workshops and to solicit input from the people who are participating and to get feedback and bring that back to the entire planning commission. We will have subsequent meetings
Okay.
at which all the commissioners will provide what they've learned at those workshops, not only from the participants who are at various stations and providing information and some of the speakers that we bring in, but we really want to have one-on-one communication with the people who are attending. and then have the feedback from each of the planning commissioners to the entire planning commission here in an open forum where we will discuss that.
Okay, so I would just add, I think that's great. And I would just ask that when you publicize it, you instead of just being a regular planning commission meeting where you don't get many people in the audience, that publicize it to be, I guess, a forum for that topic or whatever. And so that it's another opportunity for people to start coming in.
Yeah, I do plan to, I'm working on a plan to do a newsletter to the public.
Oh, great.
And, working on social media and other
that's great.
means to make sure that people are aware of the topics we'll be covering at the planning commission meetings. And as I said, it's going to be a very robust program in terms of letting people know, not just those who live here year-round, but reaching out also through the city email and everything else to the people who aren't here full-time to let them know well in advance about these workshops. And our plan is to have a single, sort of agenda so that all 5 workshops are laid out in one place in advance, described, so that people will know what days and what times a particular topic they want to involve themselves with is being held.
Great. Well, I listened to the meeting, and I think it's great. I think it's wondertal progress. So
Yeah, I'm
congratulations.
thrilled with the amount of participation that we're
Yeah,
getting from all the planning commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move right down the list. Animal issues, I'm assuming you're just going to speak to your issue when you get there. Same with the bandstand, I would assume there's nothing.
Correct.
Beach and Boardwalk?
Hello, Stan Mills, Chair of the City of Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to update you on happenings within that committee. As you know, the committee submitted 2 reports prior to the first budget meeting. One report had to do with budget priorities, referencing recommendations coming out of this committee, certain projects that had to do with the Boardwalk and Beach. The other report was more of a food for thought type of report, aiming at what different would you do in the event of a catastrophic failure of the boardwalk or taking out some of the amenities or even the restrooms. Why? Because planning's needed if things were to be done differently. Typically in the past, storm of 62 and other storms in the 90s, there's almost immediate reparations to the boardwalk, and there's not time to investigate alternative methods of construction and things. So we address that, and part of that planning comes budgeting money for consulting and engineering there, if you believe that some of those things are important enough to look into in advance. Also, as you know, that we're into the recycling topic that we made a recommendation for the Boardwalk and Beach, and the commissioner said let's go forward with that. And you'll recall that the city management jumped right immediately into logistics for determining how that program would work. The Boardwalk and Beach Committee's involvement at this point has been to look at some potential color schemes for the trash can with the recycle bin. If you recall, part of the logistics for a recycling program on the entire length of the boardwalk is to co-locate a recycle bin, recycle container next to each of the 125 trash cans along the boardwalk. So just as background information, the Boardwalk Committee's been meeting for 2 years. Probably about a year and a half ago, we took on the trash topic on the boardwalk, trying to get the trash truck off, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that came up at that time was the bright blue color of the trash can. And many thought that stuck out like a sore thumb along the boardwalk and ought to be changed. But the thought was the timing wasn't right. Let's wait and do that till maybe we consider recycling. Well, that time is in front of us. So as you saw at today's budget meeting, Kevin showed a picture of one color combination that we've looked at. We've actually made color combination, and Kevin's been very accommodating, thank you, to paint up some of the samples and get a sample top so we could actually look at them in real life. And we're going to have another meeting soon to look at that and see if we have any other recommendations due on the color scheme for the trash cans, changing them perhaps from the light blue and then the dark gray top to something else, and then options for the coloration of the recycle bin. So we'll be back in touch with you soon on those recommendations. Future agenda topics for, we are looking into developing policy statements on protecting the view shed or aesthetics. And we're also developing a policy on commercialism. What does that mean? Where that came from is we got the opportunity, we heard of an opportunity for a grant from Coca-Cola. And they will help supply trash bins and recycle bins and stuff, provided they all have the red color with the white stripe on it and the word Coca-Cola on there. So we ended up, I think, rejecting that. But it gave us food for thought, and what does commercialism mean, and when might it be appropriate, and when might it not be appropriate? Also, some of the committee members wanted to review the rules that are on the rules sign. So those are some things coming up. Would like to solicit any more potential agenda topics from you all, if you have any. And also, lastly, I'd like to thank Sharon Lynn and Kevin Williams for being so attentive to our project recommendations, and that they've looked at almost immediately. Some have been successful, some may perhaps not, but we appreciate that receptivity. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go down. I don't see anybody from the environment.
Yeah,
law. Oh, there you go.
Well, I could just comment that the Environment Committee is having a special meeting on Thursday, February 23rd at 11 a.m. January 23rd. In this room at 11 a.m. And then their regular monthly meeting, the first Friday of each month. So it'll be Friday, February 7th and in February it'll be at 1 p.m. in this room.
Okay, great. Law oversight. I don't think they have anything. Mayor's Advisory on Trees.
Yeah, just a very brief update. The Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees had our first meeting of 2020 last Friday, and we are beginning the process of sorting out our priorities for this year. And those will be in addition to our ongoing activities, which includes an expanded Arbor Day celebration this year, activities both at the school and at the city for Arbor Day in April, as well as more educational activities. The lecture we sponsored in the fall for Doug Talamay to come and speak, who was in this room, it was standing room only, was very successful, so we're looking at doing more of those. And of course, the continuation of the commemorative tree program, which actually just started in the fall, and we've already raised $20,000, and a number of trees have already been planted on Rehoboth Avenue and on Munson Street. So we'll be looking at our priorities for the year as it relates to planting around town on public property, plans for all of our parks, and plans for all of our areas around our lakes. And I'd just like to say we have had the benefit, most of our meetings, of having Liz Lingo present, and she's been immensely useful to us, and we hope we're of some help to her.
Thank you. The Parking Advisory, there's no one here. Just to let everybody know up here, I've been trying to get a hold of the chairman, and apparently she's traveling. I got a different email address today, so I sent the same note to her talking about the things that we had recommended last time. So hopefully I'll have a conversation with her and pass those along to her. Nothing from Streets and Transportation.
No, the next meeting is February 7th, so there has not been one since our last meeting.
Streets?
Streets, yes, February 7th, I believe, at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Carol, you have anything? Please.
Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. Just a couple announcements. One is that the Downtown Advisory Task Force for the Chamber will be meeting, I'm going to say right now, the first week of February. I don't have my room confirmed, and there's several items on there. It's everything from the environmental plastic issue, the DART free parking at the Rehoboth site. Potentially, we would know an answer to the shuttle if we know that at that time, or if we have any parking time frame change, we'd know that at that time. And the wind turbines would be on there also. I do want to let you know that the visitor guide is at the printer. And when you see that big semi outside of the building, that means they're being delivered, and that will be before the end of January. Okay, any questions?
How many are you printing?
140,000.
Thank you.
That's why there's a semi.
Thank you, Carol. Nothing from the Historical Society. Main Street, I think we heard from them at the,
Yeah, there's
anything
just,
further?
there's just one thing that I would, I'd mention. Main Street's having a, for the benefit of Rehoboth and Bloom, a dine and dance event on April 3rd. The hope is that people will come into town around 5 o'clock, eat at their favorite restaurant, and then at 7 p.m. To 10 p.m., there will be an oldies dance at the convention center with a DJ and snacks for $25 per person. And like I said, that will benefit exclusively our Rehoboth and Bloom program.
Great, thanks. Dick, anything from the senior center?
Nothing.
Okay. All right, we're going to move into our first agenda item of new business, which is the presentation by the Bandstand Convention Hall Special Events Committee on Convention Center proposed strategy and key investments.
Okay, great. If you guys want to come on up and get your slides ready, that's Richard and Kyle. So just quick background, the Bandstand Special Events Convention Center Committee, our charter is to make recommendations on rates and other policy issues related to these critical venues within our town. So I think, so focusing, we're going to focus today on, and what the group's been focusing on is one of our most unique assets, and that is the convention center. And so with, thanks to the expertise and time of Kyle and Richard, and I'll have them introduce themselves and their background, we've been working on developing a strategy on how we can better optimize the use of the convention center, it being such a unique and critical asset for the city. And looked at we asked them to look at a couple things, how we can continue to drive a positive economic impact across the city through the use of the convention center and the bookings, and then to also, expand usage, figure out how we can expand usage during weekdays and the off-season for anybody that wants to visit our town, particularly our residents, but the local, overall community here in Sussex County and others. So with that as a quick background, these guys have been working really hard, developing data, meeting with various stakeholders, and they're just going to give us a quick update on where they are with this strategy and discuss maybe some potential investments we could make to continue to make this a premier, even a more premier asset in Rehoboth. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. So just by way of brief introduction, my name's Richard Green. I'm a resident and homeowner at 12 Dover Street here in Rehoboth Beach. And I found myself on this committee back in August, probably due to my background in the hotel and convention center business over the last 28 years, Marriott hotels and a couple of various convention centers. Kyle?
My name is Kyle Tenek. I'm a resident of 26 Sussex Street in Rehoboth and also a local business owner at Mug and Spoon. I kind of found myself on this committee as well for being up front near the bandstand and kind of seeing on a day-to-day basis of what's happening down in that area. And then also have been a wedding photographer as well on the side since 2008, full-time as well with that. And so I kind of have a little bit of a idea of the back workings of events and stuff in that nature.
Great. So our mission was really to find out how we could help increase the use of this wonderful facility since we made this great investment in this beautiful building and use that to add to the economic impact of the city. Through our background and through my background with various cities, many convention centers operate at a loss or a break even, mainly to bring visitors and bring economic impact into a destination. So they look at the convention center, if you will, as an investment to create economic impact, not necessarily to create profit by its own, in its own entity. So that kind of was our overriding mission that the committee gave to us. And just to lay out a little bit about what we've done to date, Kyle and I needed to to get grounded. Obviously, we don't know everything there is to know about the workings of this city. So our first thing was to meet with Carol Everhart and the Chamber of Commerce and some of her key staff to find out, kind of the perception of the building, how it's being used, how she gets inquiries, then what happens to those inquiries. Then, of course, we met with the staff person here that's responsible for handling the bookings, and he was very helpful. And then we went on to meet with some of the key hotels, general managers and directors of sales. Thanks to Carol and her team, they convened that meeting at the Chamber's offices. And they were very forthcoming too with the desire to work closer with the city's convention center. And then we did kind of a brief competition study. Kyle is an expert at data mining, and he was able to get behind the scenes at various convention centers' operating plans, and we took all that into consideration. But first, we had to look ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, what do we really have here? Do we have a convention center, or do we have kind of a community center labeled convention center? And those of you know this facility a lot better than we do, but we've got one large space and two smaller rooms with a great kitchen. So that's not necessarily a draw for major conventions, but what it is a draw for is daytime events and some of the repeat events, as Stephen told us, some that come year after year and either hold sales or auctions or jazz fest or concerts. And we probably could have more of those type of events. The sweet spot, as Lisa mentioned in her introduction, is midweek off-season business is where we really wanted to try and see if we could build capacity. And the key audience, or one of the key audiences in that arena, are nonprofits or associations that have to hold either state, regional conventions, area conventions, or education courses. Medical associations, chiefs of police, fire chiefs, some of those events we've had here in Rehoboth before. So being able to kind of go after more of those. Some of the things that we did with the committee was we retook a look at pricing, thanks to recommendations from the chamber, and right-sized that pricing, if you will. And we also added rates for the smaller meeting rooms so they could be used separate from the big space, as well as included some half-day rates. So the opportunity there was to really make this space more, not just affordable, but more accessible to all different kinds of audiences. Any questions so far on what I've said so far? Here's some of our key findings. The department here that services the events was deemed as very responsive, very helpful. Sharon obviously runs a great team, and the department that oversees that, he's been here a long time and is very responsive to any client needs. We did hear that the house sound system might be able to be improved through some audiovisual, and there's been some early research work in that area. As well as we did hear that the chair quality could be improved. Our chairs are a little bit dated and a little bit small. And we didn't look at specific recommendations on chairs, but we did hear loud and clear that, chairs could be an area for improvement, especially as we consider capital expenditures in this year's budget. I mean, we're all sitting in wonderful, comfortable chairs now. I would beckon to say if we substitute these chairs for the chairs that we have in the convention center, it might be a slightly different experience. Additionally, we looked at what the real economic impact of this building is. So again, thanks to meeting with Sharon and some of her key individuals, as well as the city's financial officer, we kind of learned what the budget was to run all of the buildings and grounds. And that budget is obviously allocated to different pieces of the city. And Kyle was kind enough to kind of break this down and took a look at if we were to allocate just 40% of the total budget to the convention center, what that expense might look like. And if we were to allocate 60% of the total buildings and grounds budget, what might that look like? Now, the missing number here is what did the building bring in revenue in 2019? And according to the city's reporting, it was rated $104,000. And this is a pretty nice number. But what I don't want us to think about is needing to be a break-even or a profit center kind of building. There's certainly room to raise more money. And as you can see, Kyle did a great job of kind of allocating those expenses. And if you look along that green line, you can see what the negative or the opportunity might be on an expense coverage ratio. Anything to add, Kyle, so far?
I would say that along the lines of things too, we're actually doing fairly well in the grand scheme. Usually for expense coverage ratios, convention centers in the local area are running at around a 58% expense ratio. So if you go by the 40% budget, we're actually doing better than the average in the area. So, and I think that the biggest thing to take from this is the indirect net. That's where the money that's coming in to the actual local community and economy. And that's a pretty substantial number. I basically took this number too by taking Stephen Perry's reports on the chairs that are ordered for each event, and then taking that number and dividing it by 2, saying that if each event only had 50% of its recommended attendance, then I was gonna take that number and then multiply it by the number that's was given to me by the chamber for basically how much money is spent from somebody that either is staying overnight or just staying for the day. And I took another number to figure out that group by the Southern Delaware Tourism Board, and they said about 20% of people are day trippers. I did it at, that means that, you know, you would have a significant more, I think it was, overnight stays were significantly more than that, but I did another conservative number at 50%. And then that basically came out with the number that we see here. So I think a really conservative amount is the $1,355,023 is what you would see for the actual indirect net economic impact, yes.
And that's for usage of how many days of the convention center?
That was for usage for, I believe,
Out of the year?
it was 45 events.
We were looking at incremental.
Yeah. So it was, I think it was the event days. So 58 event days is what that was for. So, and then if you brought that down to individual days, it was about $24,000 brought in per day per an event. Just jumping a little bit ahead to the next slide there, yeah.
That includes, so that economic impact, kind of the calculation includes like the use of a hotel room,
Exactly.
restaurants, or
So
usage, that sort of thing.
Yes, the research that the chamber did was about one visitor spends about $100 if they were to day trip, and then if you were to stay overnight, it was $200, which I still think is a very conservative number, considering you know a hotel room is going to cost more than $100 a night in the area. So I think that you still have some room that you're actually bringing a significant a lot more value to the area with that.
So just real quick, so basically the convention center is only booked for about 20% of the year right now.
Yes.
And even with just booking at 20% of the year, the economic impact to our community is roughly 1.3.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
So even if you were to consider booking it more, you definitely have a lot more economic impact. Also, some things too that weren't on here too. I think it was 100. This is one of the things I found really interesting is 160 visitors provides a full-time job for somebody. So that's basically one small event. So if you can, you know, have more events and more people, you're providing actual jobs to the economy as well.
Any other questions on the data before we move on to some recommendations? Kyle's a data junkie.
I like the numbers.
We make a great
He
team.
does great talking. Yeah.
That's really great. That's great work, and that's a great model that you came up with. And it's the first time we've done that here. So thank you for taking
Absolutely.
the time.
And that's why chairs are important.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously in our current situation, we want to be able to increase the awareness of the convention center to fill open dates. And how do we actually find out if these dates are open? I think we really have to move to an online calendar of available dates. And if we need to protect the privacy of certain groups that use the convention center, that's fine. We can just show them as blocked out. But I think if we're are able to create kind of an awareness that this is a great place to hold events, being able to easily understand if a particular date or set of dates is open would be a big boon. And that could be a simple calendar with, blacked out dates without names of events, or we could have particular events listed. Then we were thinking it'd be also nice to kind of garner community awareness in what the facility actually looks like and how easy it is to book it through Stephen Perry, and how the booking process is really not very complicated. And we were thinking that it'd be a great idea to hold kind of an open house for our area hotel community and other event planners or anyone that actually plans event, whether it be yoga studios or small concerts, but actually have kind of an afternoon open house for people here in the convention center, and then we could have available pricing, give tours, that kind of thing. And then in the since we don't have a pure proactive sales staff per se, some kind of a marketing campaign, and we were thinking a small media campaign, maybe through the chamber or on our own right, with some well-placed print and digital advertising. Just the fact that this convention center does exist, how many it holds, the fact that we have 2 small rooms. And the whole small room concept, although it's incremental, to be able to get a few $100s a day for one of the small conference rooms really hit home when we had our hotel meeting, and one of the owners of one of our boutique hotels here in town said, we bought this hotel in order to hold executive level strategy sessions and board meetings, but our small hotel doesn't have that facility, and we would love to be able to use the convention center on a repeat basis for those kind of strategic planning retreats. So that kind of set in mind, well, if that's a market for this one hotel, is it a broader market? And of course, that brings with it a set of physical facilities that would be needed to be enhanced if that was a potential market. But this is kind of the low-hanging fruit, these few recommendations, in order to really bring some more business into the convention center. And I believe that is the end of our brief presentation. And we are certainly open to questions.
Can you go back to that slide about economic impact? I was curious about
That one or the?
I think the one
that
before with the net on it. First of all, I think it's fascinating to see the calculation, and I love data myself, and just to see the calculation of the economic impact in the area. But I'm not really sure why you netted it out, because here's the thing: all of that economic impact, a great majority of it, except for maybe the little bit of percentage that we get from the hotel tax, accrues to the businesses. 100% of the cost is borne by the city. So I don't know that you need to net it out, because they're in different buckets. And one is a benefit and the other is a cost. And so our challenge is always to fund the infrastructure and all of the amenities that go with continuing to provide a city that allows you to have that kind of economic impact. See what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I guess there are a few things. I do see what you're saying. A lot of it's going to go to the business. There are a few things that would go to, say, for instance, like parking meters and stuff of that nature.
Right.
Also, the draw of having more people come to town, so it increases property value, so you get some taxes off of that as well. But yeah, I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Incrementally,
I don't think you need to net it out. I think the economic impact is what it is. The costs are what they are.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
So, yeah, I just throw that out there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from other people, because we've been close to this. I don't know, Edward or Steve, Pat.
I think this is a great presentation. I think that the economic impact numbers are low. I think when we did the analysis just on the Greyhound event, I mean, that was pretty close to almost $400,000
By itself.
by itself. So I think these numbers, while conservative, are, I think the analysis is great. It shows the value of having the convention center, and it's an important asset for us. And while it may not make money just on the rental fees, the impact it has with people, coming for an event and renting a house, subsequently paying the rental tax, staying in a hotel and paying the lodging tax, parking for the weekend. I mean, that funds a third of our city's budget. So it's important, and I think this is great.
So I was interested about when you said the sweet spot would be midweek nonprofits. I think that's really interesting, and I think that the idea of a calendar and a way to push this out through either the chamber, so people, there are folks out there, and the 8, I think, hotels that you talk to, that they're aware that this is a good place for their folks to come to. I think that's great. And I would hope that we can move forward with this calendar and the relationship with the chamber to help. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to activate those sales departments to be adjunct sales for this building as well, and work hand in hand with Stephen and the team here in trying to bring more business in. Obviously, they're looking for midweek because weekends, although they don't fill all off-season, but that's their real need period where they're most flexible in their hotel room rates and are able to be flexible. And oftentimes, in some cities, hotels actually underwrite the cost of the convention center and build it into their room rates and offer that convention center as a complimentary add-on because they're covering it because they are making more of the money on hotel rooms. So,
Thank you.
Did you say there was a competition? You were going to talk about competitive analysis or something that you all had done? I thought somebody said that in the beginning.
we did look at other cities, but we're so unlike most other cities.
How we think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're unique.
Yes.
Yeah, we've done some analysis compared to the Ocean City Convention Center, but obviously it's a different. The closest I've gotten down to is breaking it into percentages, and the percentages are kind of dollar for dollar. Obviously, it's never going to be the same. You're talking about apples and oranges, but the percentages you can kind of get a little bit of some information as opposed to none at all.
This is very, very helpful. Thank you, and thanks to Lisa and the entire committee. It is really good to have this data, have the recommendations. It seems to point, and I guess it's almost redundant to say it here, but it really points at what the potential can be if we take even a small look at these recommendations, which don't look like they would carry very, very much in the way of cost to the city. I mean, to increase awareness, to do an online calendar, to do an open house. I mean, those are things that should be kind of easy to do and expensive to do and could have a big, big payoff in the future. In terms of your recommendations, well, you mentioned the need for an improved sound system and improved seating capacity. Now, they're not in this list of recommendations, but they are recommendations, I take it.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we didn't know if it was in our purview to say replace X amount of chairs with new chairs, but yeah, we have passion on new chairs.
So, we've talked only a little bit about that in terms of our budget going forward, and to replace all of the chairs, I don't know how many all means. That's a lot, right? But there are incremental ways to do it. I assume that you can sell premier seating by having improved chairs, and you can buy X number as opposed to the whole house.
Kyle did a study on how many chairs are used average per event.
Yeah, I
you want to
believe
talk a little bit about that?
I believe it's 368 on average per event was off the top of my head. It's in here.
And our
that was-
inventory of chairs is right about 1,000?
Yeah, about 1,000. So that was the chairs that had been previously looked at, I believe, were $77,000 to replace all the chairs. It was about $22,000 to replace 350 chairs. So that's if you were to get not the whole amount, but just
Cost
350.
for 350 is what again, Kyle?
I think it was 22,000, I believe, just in some change. They were $63 a piece, I believe.
Well, if I may, that was the mesh chair
The mesh
that
chair, yes.
was comfortable to some and not comfortable to others, and
Yeah, I think that they're still, that wasn't necessarily decided on upon chair, obviously, too. So I think that there, that's just some numbers to go off of is basically, but.
So your average 368 seats, I think, is what you said?
That's close enough.
Well, I'd be curious, to me, it would be more helpful to know, 40 times there's people in 368 chairs, but there's 20 other times that we need all 1,000. That would be more helpful to me, to actually
They have
know,
that data, yeah.
to have that information.
On the total amount sold, or total amount of chairs put at one time? Is that what you were saying? Yeah, it's 384 is the average. The maximum amount are events that are like the Delaware Jazz Association, and those are 950 chairs.
Okay.
Okay.
See this chart here? This would be helpful. I think this is what you handed
Yeah,
out.
that's that. Yeah.
If you could.
I kind of
name
slimmed it down a little bit because I didn't want to give everybody too much data, but yeah, I have those
No, I
charts if you want.
understand, but this gives a.
Per an event.
Yes, it says it's 368 is the average, but there are 10 or 12 that are above 400. or,
Correct, yes.
450,
Yes.
which, in my mind, as I look at the list of the people that are using the facility now, I would say most of these people under 400 probably don't care about chairs. It's really the people in the top 3 or 4 that are sitting there for 2 hours and not moving.
Yeah, I think we decided it was like 6 or 8 events were the main events that they were really going to be.
Because a lot of these people are sitting around round tables, they're walking around visiting people, whereas the top 3, 5 or so events are sit there and do nothing.
Correct.
So mostly concerts or something
Yeah.
like that.
But what I'd like to add is because of the good work that Richard and Kyle have done so far, we're having a different type of conversation now than we were a year ago. And so now we're talking more strategically, we're looking at, what strategy do we need to have to attract people to use the facility during the week and in the off-season, and to build around the fairly significant, almost guaranteed revenue that we have on an annual basis because of the repeat usage during certain times of the year. And so I'm encouraged by that, and just what we've talked about up here today is very encouraging to look at, the pros and cons of, for renting chairs, for, incremental replacement of chairs. One of the things that has to be taken into consideration and has been discussed a good bit is depending on the racks that come with certain chairs that are bought, there's storage challenges. And so these are all good things, I think, to have as far as a conversation. But I'm very encouraged by the opportunity for us to add to the community by just having a more strategic approach to the use of the facility below us.
How does the clear space coming in for 143 days, I think, is that what you said, 100?
52 or something.
Okay, how does that impact growth for that year anyway, for next year?
Well, it's phenomenal because you've already filled more
well, there you
dates
go.
than you ever have felt. But it
Wow.
also means that the need to get out those dates that are available is more critical.
Right, okay.
So that you can see what's left. And basically, 2021 will be a hole filling year.
Okay,
And
yeah.
be able to hopefully create some incremental business in the holes created.
But you can't really ramp up, I guess, anything else till after that.
Well, the good news is this effort takes a long ramp-up time. So the fact that
Okay.
ClearSpace booked is almost a gift because it gives us a chance to plan that strategy
Right,
and really map the future. I mean, if we want to talk blue sky, and you're all commissioners looking well into the future, I mean, if we were ever to do, any kind of parking structure in our parking lot, the ability to add meeting space or exhibit space on the ground floor would be a phenomenal opportunity, and somehow connect it to this existing space and add space to it with revenue space up above would be phenomenal thought. So that's just some blue sky thinking.
And I think that this is a good opportunity to maybe start on a smaller scale even, because if, I think I have the numbers right here. So we currently rent out the convention center 58 days out of the year. 200 days would be, at least in the 2021 season, right, would be clear space. So it still leaves, approximately 165 days or so that it's not rented. So there could be a slow incremental ramp up, to getting the word out, over the next year or so, because we still have 165 or so days.
Yeah, I think it's a
Correct?
great
I mean, is
opportunity to
that
do that
the
as well,
thinking?
because you can
Yeah.
kind of try some different things out.
Yeah.
You're not absolutely having to book those dates. You can kind of try some different options out and see what works and what doesn't work, so.
That's great. That's, you guys did a super job.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
Thank you very
For
much.
the group here? Carol, anything that you'd like to add? You're part of the committee, so. Okay, I love that answer. Thank you guys very, very much for your time and expertise. And so to conclude this, I guess I'd just like to ask my colleagues here if we could ask the city manager and her team in conjunction with Richard, Kyle, and others from the committee to pursue a few things. One, an online calendar of the bookings. Two, pursuing this idea of an open house with the hotels, because I really think that's our marketing channel, for the use of the convention center in the long term. I think, but there's other options. Three, to work with Sharon and her communication team on some sort of, at least a starting point on a media campaign. Four, continue to work on maybe a chair solution to be included in this year's budget, which is something, maybe it's 100 chairs that we replace and use those for premier seating or something along those lines, at least to show that we're listening and taking into account that feedback. And five, see if we can build in, the AV investment, improvements in the AV system, at least the minimum investment, to help kind of up the game in the convention center. So
In the next budget cycle? Because they're already in there for the year after that.
I'm talking about this budget cycle.
So you want the audio-visual as well as the
Maybe
chairs?
some investment in chairs. Maybe it's not the whole
I was talking about
77.
audio-visual.
Pardon me,
The
yeah. and
audio-visual,
AV,
but also?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
What's
both of those.
How much was the audiovisual?
It was like 115, I think was the,
And
or maybe
what
we
does
do
that
that
include? I mean, that would be helpful to have a breakdown on
Yep,
that.
I think that's
If you
fair.
could send that to us, that would be helpful.
Yeah, Lisa, I mean, a lot of these things, I would think that this would be a great opportunity for the committee to put together all of those things. I mean, obviously, working with the city manager as far as the numbers on the, the chairs and stuff, and I think that's already been pretty much so done, the audio visual. But working with the committee to put together the calendar and working with Stephen on how it could be put in. So, I think it'd be very easy to be
Well,
implemented.
we've tried this, to be honest, we've tried putting this calendar in place for about
No,
two
I mean, but have you
years.
presented them a pro forma
it.
calendar? Here's
Yeah,
what we think.
we have. We need some help. We need commitment. We need help, just to kind of move this forward. Like, there's internal calendars, but to expose those external, figure out the process for keeping it updated, whether it's electronically or manual. We'd like to just sit down and figure out how we can move that forward.
And then also, the same thing with the town hall with the hotel owners. I think
Sure.
that would be great for the committee to bring them in and take them through the convention center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show them
No,
whatever.
it's a great
Because
idea.
I think it would be very
great
important to
idea.
have the committee kind of interface with the people that be using the convention center more so than just, putting it off onto the
No, I
staff.
wasn't suggesting we put it on the staff. I'm saying the staff needs to be part of those discussions. That's what right, is that correct? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not saying just toss it over the fence. The committee should continue to be
No,
involved.
I think it was always intended to
Yeah.
be a collaborative effort.
Absolutely, that's a better way of putting it.
And we, it's a, but I think we've made tremendous progress. And so we just need to continue to build on that at a pace that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't some of your marketing strategy work, can be done in conjunction with Main Street or with the chamber? I mean, this morning, they were talking about all the marketing and all you're doing through social media and everything. Why wouldn't you just encompass some of this into that?
We are, but I think we found over the past couple of years with this is that, we really do need to have the city, as a collaborative partner in this as well, the city team, just to make sure things are coordinated. There's a whole process for booking. So the city team has to kind of be at least engaged to some degree in this.
Well, and they are, but I think we're building
Continue to be,
kind of expertise, where there's a greater energized leadership in Main Street, and and Carol and the folks at the chamber have always been engaged. They look to the rest of us for requests and guidance and suggestions and those kind of things. So I think we kind of know who the key representatives are, and we just need to continue to build on the data and build on the plan on how we can make incremental improvements that will be beneficial to a larger group.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. This is a big part of this is coordination and leadership with the chamber as well as with Main Street, 100%, and with the committee members. But I think the city team's a big part of that as well. So, does everybody agree? These are some good ideas. We should continue to
absolutely.
pursue them and update.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for everybody's time and effort, and just please thank Richard and Kyle. You guys did a super job, and this is
Thank you for your time and
less than a
efforts on this.
part-time job, so thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. And to Steve, too, who's a member of the committee, helped guide this, so thanks.
All right, we're going to move right into old business, which is A, further discussion and possible vote on amendments to Chapter 88 Animals in the Municipal Code. Glenn, Dick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this, you've seen this previously, I think a couple times. Last time Commissioner Byrne wasn't here, he did follow up, though, with some of the comments that were made, sent me a couple emails of things that needed added. They're mostly typographical type things, but there is one significant area that I want to bring to your attention. It is in, if you go to page 2 of the ordinance, it's in section 4 of the ordinance, lines 59 through 68, really. And what this does is, this section is titled Livestock and Fowl, and it basically prohibits maintaining any cows, goats, sheep, hog, horse, or other animal or fowl of any sort upon any premises. So it ensures all of that, which was in the ordinance previously, but we've come to learn that there is at least one property in the city that has both honeybees and chickens. It's a property that backs up to the old Baymart area. His neighbors have not complained. Nobody's complaining. The chickens are being phased out, and we thought it appropriate to allow for some accommodations. First, for the chickens can be kept as of January 1. If you have chickens as of January 1, 2020, you can continue to keep them until such use is discontinued. Honeybees are a little bit different in that the state of Delaware recognizes honeybees as livestock, so we didn't want this section to suggest that you can't have honeybees in the city, and he has honeybees. So Commissioner Byrne, I think, has spoke with him, or somebody on the committee has, and we just looking to accommodate somebody who's...
I had a very long conversation a couple of days ago with the owner, and I mean, who would have known that there were approximately 20 chickens over on Silver Lane? And this gentleman has been raising chickens for over a decade. There's been no neighborhood complaints, no complaints from anywhere. Very private kind of yard, very well-intentioned gentleman who raises them, clean pens. They are his pets. They are not farm animals. He has a name for each of them. Yeah, he takes the oldest ones.
Each of the bees?
He takes the oldest ones into his laundry room every evening to sleep so that they have a comfortable and not a cold or a hot, humid night, as the weather may be. He is phasing them out, and they will, he's phasing them out.
Breeding them, he's
He
not
is-
buying any
Not
more.
replacing them.
He is not, he's not adding to the flock, he's not breeding.
Say that.
They will all die off within the next couple of years, and
Natural causes.
Buying new ones.
so it's,
Let's hope, yes.
so what we're doing is accommodating the fact that he's been doing this for a long, long time. And there was never an intent from the Animal Issues Committee, let me say, to ban honeybees. They're critical in terms of pollination and other environmental things. And when I learned that the Delaware Department of Agriculture classifies honeybees as livestock, we decided that they should definitely be an exception. And Glenn, if I may, let me just say a couple of other things that are a little more general, that I've said before, but I think given the interesting headlines that our newspaper friend back here writes, it sells newspapers, it causes drama, it gets people to comment. It doesn't necessarily get at the heart of what this is all about, although sometimes it does. Chris, thank you. The Animal Issues Committee is made up of several hardworking individuals, Libby Stiff, Marcia Maldies, Bob Harrison, Ray Bryant, and in the audience today, and last but not least, is Cheryl Crow, who has played a significant lead role on the revision of this code. And let me say that this code is like a lot of our code. It's a patchwork of well-intentioned laws that have been put together over many, many years and has resulted in truly a patchwork of today, a lot of outdated information, a lot of information that is not consistent with state law and state policy and best practice. There's redundancy in there, and there's inconsistent kinds of information. And so the update is intended to overcome all of that and get us a more concise, up-to-date code. So a number of the letters and the comments that I've received or that have been put out in public in general seem to be somewhat ignorant of the fact that we've already had a code. We've had a code. Most of what is in front of you is in the code already. It's just that this is a cleanup process to make it consistent again with state law, to make it less redundant and to follow best practice across our state and across the nation. So that's what we have. And there's a paper that's maybe being distributed that the Stan Mills put together that has made some suggestions. I've had a few other people that have gone through it with kind of a fine-tooth comb and have made suggestions. We have, through our solicitor, corrected some of the typos that have shown up, some of the language that, while it's not incorrect, isn't necessarily consistent from one page to the next. And so I think we're in a much, much better place than we were when this process started. It's been a long process. It's been a lot of work. We have spent probably close to 18 months going over this code in a variety of ways and with this committee and Cheryl's leadership moving this through. Cheryl, do you have anything else that you would like to add? And if you do, you need to come up to the microphone here. Okay, well, let's just see if there's questions, and then we'll bring you up if we need to.
You had some other stuff?
I was going to go back to former Commissioner Mills, because I've looked at them since we've been sitting here. I think there are some of them, if not all of them, certainly have are valid and probably should be incorporated.
I would concur with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Say that again.
Clarifying.
right. So I think all of these are probably things that should be included. The question is, do you want to go through? I'm happy. This one page is not too long. I can go through them and just make sure everybody gets a nod. And if you're intending to get to a vote today, if you're not intending to get to a vote today, I'll incorporate them and bring them back for the workshop.
I mean, I would hope to get a vote in today because
too.
of all the work that's been done by the committee.
So let me just go through them real
I
quick.
agree.
There's really only one item in here that I see as a correction, and the rest are just clarifications.
I agree. That's probably a better way. Everybody has seen them. If you have questions, raise them. If not, we're going to amend the ordinance to include them. So which one did you want to raise?
Well, line 30, the word color
Obviously.
should state collar, C-O-L-L-A-R, a dog's collar.
Yeah, those are type, most of what's on here.
Yeah, so I think everybody concurred
typos.
with you, Commissioner, that all of them should be incorporated, but there's one, I think you said that maybe, and,
No, that's the
Okay.
that's the word the actual
I didn't see anything
word
that
change.
should raise anybody's eyebrows. so.
And we've
I
done a
think they're all
couple of
fine.
these things because Stan looked at, I think it was the January 6th
Yeah. Sophia Memorial.
version, and there is now a January 15th version where several of these things were corrected. For example, wherever it stated Brandywine Valley BV SPCA, I think it now states the local SPCA, in recognition of the fact that the name of the local SPCA could change
We
again
changed that as a result of.
in the
meeting where you weren't
future.
here, so.
So we've done that. We cleared up some of the poop scoop language that seemed confusing to a few people.
As you can see, we've certainly dialed back the weight of material from your budget meeting to this
Yeah.
meeting.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
As in poop scoop language, yes.
Right. Trying to keep a little bit light on a Friday night.
I would hope that we could vote today, and there's nothing in Stan Mills' comments here that I disagree with, and so I'm more than happy to accept that Glenn would go through, and if it makes sense to the solicitor to make that change, that clarification is what it really is.
I agree.
I'm open to that.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
If you get to a motion, then you'll want to make a motion to adopt the ordinance, amending it with the submission that former Commissioner Mills made.
What, just to be clear, one, I agree, all of the changes should be made. There's some defining terms and stuff that are absolutely necessary and should be in there, and some other inconsistencies. But there is one question, not so much, and that's line 204, the meaning of appearance tickets, which I don't think is clear. And I'm not sure that, being that Mr. Mills posed a question and not a correction or a statement, I think needs to be discussed. The only, and I'm in the minority, but I would not like to vote on this without seeing a final version, but clearly I'm in the minority on that. And the only other comment that I have on the entire ordinance is one public comment that has been made, and it seems to be clear to some people in the public, but it's not to me, the fact that we are not allowing pets on sidewalks.
What
Or-
line number are you
A lot of
talking
people have
about?
mentioned that.
I'm sorry.
Clarified that.
Dogs are not permitted on any sidewalk, parkway, street, or thoroughfare.
What
What
line are you
number?
on?
What line number?
This is a public comment. I don't see it in the ordinance, so
No,
I'm
I don't see
asking
it
a
in here.
question.
That was taken out of
changed it out
context.
loud.
and
Right.
Okay.
One of the challenges.
I just want to make,
But a lot of
be
people
sure it
read
was
it that way,
addressed.
Yeah.
so-
I just want to be sure
Yes.
that one comment was
Right,
addressed.
right. And of course, we allow dogs on our public property.
Obviously, I
given
just
several-
wanted to-
Given several caveats, that they are leashed, that they're licensed, that they're well-behaved, that the custodian or owner of that dog cleans up the waste in proper ways. And all of that is spelled out in here. One of the challenges that we have, and it's become very clear to me going through this process, is that every iteration of this that goes out to the public doesn't have the complete red line and underlined version. They have, I'm not sure, Glenn, what you call it, but it'll just indicate that we're deleting something, but doesn't give everything that we're deleting.
This one, that's right. This one does a pretty good job because we've shown most of the ordinance we've shown most of what's on the books in the ordinance, and we show it by strike through and underline. But if was an entire section, if there were no changes being made to it, it's not in the ordinance because it
Right.
just stays the way it is.
Right, and then that's when it makes it easy for the general public to take things out of context because they're not seeing the entire context.
And that happens anytime we have
Yeah.
something like this.
Yeah, so, that's a real challenge for people.
So what would people like to do? Would you like to vote on it tonight or postpone it?
The only thing I'm
once
looking
the
for-
amendments?
The only thing I wanted to raise is the appearance ticket that That is in Commissioner Mills, and I can't find it frankly in the
He's
So,
looking at a different
It's
number.
line 210.
line 210 in the current
210,
version.
yeah.
Oh, for purposes of enforcing the provision, appearance tickets may be issued. Oh, is it,
Meaning appear, you may
Meaning
have
to
to
appear.
appear
yeah.
in front of the audience.
Yeah.
That's what appear.
That's what that means, yes.
Rather than just, here's a ticket and.
Yeah, and that's the language that was previously in there, and
Yeah.
we didn't change it.
I think it's
Can we clarify that or word it differently? Because I would read that and not be sure what it means.
I guess you could put it in definition,
Can we make
what
it
an
a,
appearance ticket is. if
yeah,
you
can
want
we
to
just
say.
make it a
Appearance before the,
defining term?
why wouldn't you say appearance before the alderman's court or something?
It should be alderman, but it won't always be alderman.
Oh,
This is
yeah,
part, this is part of it.
okay.
So I would say.
Appearance before judicial
Tickets
cutting.
tickets requiring an appearance before, tickets requiring appearance in a legal proceeding may be issued, just to clarify that you
Yeah,
have to go
that
through
would
some
do it.
legal process. Tickets,
That's clear, yeah. And,
Okay.
you know, let me add that we did sit with Chief Banks some months ago and went through every area that deals with enforcement in here. And he made a few minor suggestions and then approved everything that we put in front of him. We wanted to make sure that our police force was supportive of the direction that we were going.
okay, I've got that. And we'll incorporate this list. Did you want to go to the public to see if anybody has some?
I'm sorry, I just had really one minor, just really minor in line 190, has in his or her immediate possession. Because we use his or her further on down.
Oh, there's just
Oh.
there, yeah.
It's just, yeah,
190,
yeah,
yeah.
just to make it consistent.
Got it.
Anything else from the commissioners? Anybody in the public? Okay. So it's up to you all. We either
Well-
vote now or we postpone and vote at some other meeting in the
I
future.
think we ought to vote now, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll make the motion that, to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 88 Animals of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 2001, by amending all sections and to include memo dated January 16th, 2020 from Stan Mills with corrections by line.
And to edit line 90 to include his or her, and to clarify at line 210 the meaning of an appearance ticket.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 88 Animals of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 2001 by amending all sections and also to include corrections and suggestions by the solicitor. Are there any further discussion?
I would just like to ask, because I'm completely fine with the content, it's a process thing for me. I would ask that the city solicitor provide a final red line version at the next commissioners meeting, so we can see the final version.
Yeah, you can
Even
probably
if
send this
we-
out before the meeting.
Yeah, even if we do approve it today, I'd still like to see
No problem.
it back before us.
Anything else? Otherwise, I'll just go down the list. Commissioner Gay,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrne,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser,
Aye.
Commissioner Cluzy,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer,
Aye.
Commissioner Shrewsnowski,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work you guys did. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Let me go on record to compliment, and on behalf of the city, thank Cheryl Crow for the leadership that she's provided in this process over the last year. Thank you, Cheryl.
Great. Then we'll move into the last item on the agenda from old business, which is further discussion on possible ordinance to reflect any discrepancies with interpretation of gross floor area for both commercial and residential. There's a draft ordinance that's been doctored up a couple times in your packet. Glenn, I'll leave that open to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned earlier, this issue really came to light based upon some Board of Adjustment applications that were pending recently on commercial projects. We learned that we had been reviewing plans one way on the residential side of the house, another way on the commercial side of the house. This ordinance seeks to bring clarity to how gross floor area should be interpreted, and that then flows into how the floor area ratio gets calculated as well. So you have an ordinance in front of you. The meat of the ordinance starts at line 43. And again, this is a underlining. These are new insertions. Strike-throughs are deletions. So everything you see that does not have an underline or a strike-through is existing code. The intent of this ordinance is to, well, there's a few things that it does. One major thing that it does is it specifically exempts underground parking areas from being included in gross floor area. There's been a couple applications that have come before the Board of Adjustment recently, and in both instances that I can recall, they gave relief from the codes arguably requiring that space be counted as gross floor area. Part of the reason it makes sense, or at least the Board of Adjustment suggested it makes sense, is that, remember, gross floor area also drives how many off-street parking spaces you have to have. So it's kind of nonsensical to have your off-street parking increase your off-street parking requirement if you count as gross floor area. So that's part of it. It would also exempt from the inclusion in gross floor area things such as the way we put it in here, it says, and, so let me read this first section, because this is the definition of gross floor area. The sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of a building measured from the exterior face of the exterior walls or from the center line of a wall separating two attached buildings, including basements, but not including any space where the floor-to-ceiling height is less than 6 feet, subsurface parking areas, and outdoor areas including, for example, open porches, decks, patios, balconies, and pergolas, subject to the following. And then there's a couple exceptions that were in the code already, but the language you should focus on, and again, this is at line 52, is subsurface parking areas are exempted from it. And then we give some examples. Outdoor areas including, for example, open porches, decks, patios, balconies, and pergolas. So that, I think, is another, some would say it's not a major
I have a question
inclusion.
on that, though, the way it's written. It said, including basements, but not including any space where the floor-to-ceiling height is less than 6 feet. Subsurface parking areas and outdoor areas including, for example, open porches, decks, patios, balconies, and pergolas, which you just read. But when I read this, open porches, an open porch, the way I think of it, is open on, 3 sides, screened
Right.
porch. But to me, it looks like that has to be 6 feet, less than 6 feet. I'm having trouble with that, the way it's written.
That's not the intent. The intent is,
Could be my just interpretation.
if other people read it that way, we should clarify it, because
I did not. I read that as being separate than,
Yeah, and it's-
than something being
So-
under
And there was a continuation of
Okay,
other
so the
things.
floor-to-ceiling height is only for the basement.
yeah, it's really,
Fine.
it's really.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good
Good.
then. All right.
Okay, so there's that. I will mention that the subsection A, which starts at line 56, I had some conversations with a couple local attorneys who had questions about whether this section should be amended as well. It says it shall include the horizontal, so this is again talking about gross floor area. It shall include the horizontal area of any space beneath any building created by pilings, piers, or any other structural support which is greater than 4 feet in height. So if you have a building that's raised on a piling and there's 4 feet of space between the bottom of the building basically and the grade of the earth below, then it doesn't count. Once you go past 4 feet and you go higher than 4 feet, then that area at grade under the building would count as gross floor area. Now it gives some allowances for if you're required to raise your building because of the floodplain ordinance, you can raise it to that level required by the floodplain ordinance, and in fact 1 foot more, and that area below won't count as gross floor area. But there was a question still about, does this somehow change what we're talking about exempting here. So we went through a bunch of suggestions. One that I had is, because the concern, I guess, for example, is if you have balconies or something that sticks out in the building, and then you have another one that sticks out in it, and there's a series of them, there's a question about whether you're raised above the one below, and does that now make it count? But I wanted to clarify that it's only the space at grade level that would ever be counted under this subsection A provision. So one thing I suggested that was kind of a middle point between some of the things we were talking about is including at subsection A, it shall include the horizontal area of any space at grade beneath any building created by pilings, piers. Just to clarify, it's only the space on the ground that's being counted. So we'll move on to some others. You might want to think about that a little bit, but that's just a clarification that.
I agree, that's
Okay.
I would add it as a clarification.
And just so I'm clear, open porches includes screened in, but not environmentally upgraded to provide heat and cooling.
That's
and
right.
that kind of thing.
That's right. If it's a temperature-controlled space, it will.
Okay, thank you, temperature controlled, right.
So moving on, then you'll see at line.
Sorry, just really
Sure,
quick on
sure,
clarification there. So basically, it does not include the horizontal area, or it does? Does gross floor area
So if you're
include the
it
horizontal?
includes the horizontal area at grade if you raise it more than 4 feet. But if the floodplain requires you to raise it even more than 4 feet, then it doesn't count. So if you raise it up a half a foot for one reason or another, that space under the building does not count. If you raise it up more than 4 feet under the ordinance, it does count, because the argument is you're going higher, it looks like more bulk, and so that gets counted.
But isn't the main reason we're even changing this is like is the premise that
Balconies.
like these things that are that have, like porches, balconies, they're not more, it's not more living space, right? Therefore, it should not be counted in the FAR. Isn't that the primary premise upon which we're making this change? Is that we shouldn't be counting things that are not adding living space? You see what I'm saying?
I see exactly. I see absolutely, because
And this is not adding living space, requirements for more parking. That's not what this
Those
is.
are different calculations. Living space and requirements for parking are different calculations. I have always thought, then I don't mean to interrupt, but
No,
this
please.
came up at the planning commission,
Yeah.
and I wanted to make it very clear back then that we were looking at gross floor area as feeding into two different calculations. It feeds into FAR, feeds into parking requirements. They're not necessarily the same. For instance, I agree about exempting underground parking from gross floor area, and I know that there have been some variances given. But Glenn, the example you just said is the situation where you're requiring parking on parking, and that's the thing that had come up, when we were talking about clear space, and I agree that should come out. However, if you have other underground space that is not parking, that's not the same issue. On the other hand, I'm in support of exempting underground area because it doesn't add to bulk. So to me, both of those criteria are met. You're not being redundant on parking requirement, you're not adding to bulk. But another one, frankly, is this height greater than 12 feet. I don't know, that's counted twice right now, and I have not had a chance to discuss, actually, I meant to do that. I did not have a chance to discuss with building and licensing why that's in there, what that means, because there may be a very, very good reason for that to be in there from a FAR perspective, from a gross floor area perspective, but I can also tell you it doesn't make any sense for parking because you don't have more people just because the ceiling's
I remember
high.
that discussion when it was implemented. That was more of a bulk issue, because it's almost like you have 2 stories, but you're only counted as one if you count
Right.
just that first floor.
Yeah.
So
So there may be a good reason for that to be in there, but if we were going to change, everything in the code related to gross floor area that was confusing, we also ought to look at where parking comes into play, is all I'm saying.
So I want to be sure I was clear. So on what Commissioner Schlosser was mentioning about the area under a raised building,
Yeah.
you would be in support of removing that as being counted, or you would like it to remain in and be counted.
I'm not sure I know enough.
I sort of, when you said, aren't you exempting like all these outdoor spaces? It is just one of those outdoor
It's an outdoor
spaces.
space. It's not like I'm gonna.
But you're talking
have
about all
people live
outdoor
there
spaces.
and, you know, and that's, it doesn't make sense to me as to why that would be included in, you know, the gross floor.
But it is.
area.
Well,
It is, but I'm saying maybe it shouldn't be.
But then then the other thing you have to do, because it's all goes together as part of one puzzle. The FAR was set at what it was set at because these things were included. If you take things out, then you may want to go back and revisit FAR, because otherwise, what have you done but increase the bulk? Everywhere, residential, commercial, everywhere.
Tell me
Can I
something,
make-
Matt. Isn't there something in the code that says we can't have a first floor above 30 inches from grade anyway?
There is, yes, 3 feet from the center line of road.
Yeah, so
So
you
there's
can't have a
something
floor
that
there,
we
so
may-
it really,
So this would.
I don't think we'd ever allow somebody to have
Right.
4 feet
Yeah.
underneath the first floor.
I believe that the only place that that would come into play, and it's a very limited basis in our city, would be a flood zone area.
And this provides accommodations for that where it's exempted from. So I guess we're having a non-issue, a non-discussion on an issue that doesn't actually
Right, so
occur.
do we need that in
Okay.
there? I don't know.
Well, we need the part that
okay.
clarifies that it certainly doesn't get counted if it's a floodplain issue. But I think rather than getting into the weeds on it, maybe just make the edit that says at grade.
I think the adding at grade makes sense.
I can live with that.
This is going to go to a public hearing anyway, so allow Matt and I to have some more conversations about maybe it needs to be taken out completely, but I just want to be sure that we've had that conversation.
Well, if you're going to talk about grade, then I also think subsurface parking should be reworded, parking 100% below grade. Or basement area, so 100% below grade, not just subsurface parking.
If I may,
yeah.
I would be careful with that. As we drill down, we hit a water table, and so we may be forced to raise that parking level up because, let's say we're calling out an 8-foot parking area.
Yeah.
You start to do your basement investigation and you discover a water table at 6 feet. You can no longer put your parking down there at 8 feet, so consider that as well.
So some of it could actually be above grade.
Correct.
But it's still subsurface.
Right. Yeah, I believe the code says as long as it's a foot down and continues. I'm not positive on that, so don't quote me. But as long as it's foot down and continues down, then it is all counted as subsurface parking.
Got it, thanks.
And I mean, obviously you're the policymakers, but it seems to me that so long as the building is continuing to comply with the height limitation, which it has to, getting cars under buildings is a good
The Baltimore
thing, right?
Hotel to allow them to go 5 floors as long as they stayed at 42 feet, because they were starting below grade.
Correct.
So then, if you look at line 80, one of the,
Sorry, Glenn, before we move from that
Sure.
page, did we answer your question
Yeah,
about the
for
12
now.
feet? The next
Well,
one?
no, I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay, okay.
So where I was moving is to the next edit, which is at line 80. You'll see the words residential districts with a line under it. This section, the way it was previously written, it wasn't very clear what applied to residential and what applied to commercial. So I think last time we were together, I was asked to break it out so it's clear what's residential and what's commercial. So this is just clarifying that the next following sections under that Roman, or under that number 1 are all for residential purposes. Under the residential section, we've now deleted, if you recall, a lot of the discussion at the Board of Adjustment was this 250 square foot exemption for open front porches, and how did that work in the context of what's exempted and what is not exempted. Under this version of the ordinance, since open porches are exempted, there would be no 250 square foot exemption because the entire thing's exempted. So this section comes out, and there's no more confusion about why is a portion of it. And
I don't know why are we exempting open porches?
I can tell you, not the exact, but I was around when it happened. It was basically to incentivize keeping porches.
Oh, no, I know why
It's there.
why the incentive was put in, but why in this revision of the code we're excluding covered porches now? I don't remember having that conversation
Right, I don't
here
know.
at
the
all.
definition of,
Balconies, yes.
You don't want it to be excluded from the floor.
but recall, the definition of gross floor area, where this all flows
Covered
from.
porches with a roof?
Yeah, but it's still screened in.
Screened
It's
in.
not environmentally,
So remember this,
It's not climate controlled, so it's not like it's a three-season.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a heated room. It would just be a screened-in porch.
More foundationally, the definition of gross floor area, and this is what got talked about a lot at the Board of Adjustment, is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of a building measured from the exterior face of the exterior walls. So the question is a screened porch, it's open on three sides, does it incorporate exterior walls? And I think the idea behind an open porch that has to be open, those aren't exterior walls. There could be supports, but the exterior wall is in my mind, the exterior
And
walls.
maybe I'm just off base here, but I thought we were all in agreement that balconies, just because they have a railing, people go out there, you can fit 4 people, whatever, it doesn't count. But I thought we all agreed with Matt's interpretation that anything with a roof was included in the FAR. Or the gross floor
Well,
area. That's my
like-
recollection of the conversations that we had here.
But again, you could leave the 250 square feet in if you really wanted to do that. Taking it away like this may make a porch a little bit larger, but don't forget, there's still a lot coverage situation.
Right.
So the chances, unless you're going to have half your house be, screen porch, you still got lot coverage issues.
Pat, I'm glad you brought that up, because this taking out of this paragraph in particular struck me as one of the biggest instances of potential unintended consequences. So let me give you an example, because I actually did a little bit of math on this. And you're right, that the limitations for house size are twofold, the FAR and lot coverage. So if you've got the 40% lot coverage on a 5,000 square foot lot, that's a 2,000 square foot footprint, right? And if you build a 2-story house, that'd be 4,000, but you can't build a 4,000 because of FAR. So the FAR is if you didn't have a pool, would be 0.6, so it'd be 3,000. By taking this language out, you could put a 500 square foot porch on the front, 2-story, voila, you have a 4,000 square foot house that would meet code. I can't imagine that is what is intended here.
No, but the second floor could not have a living space over the porch.
It's another porch I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2 porches, a double-decker porch, a porch off the master bedroom and a porch off the first floor. They'd both be porches.
Right, I have that.
Okay.
So, if I
I'm
may.
not living out there.
All I'm saying is that by today's, it doesn't matter as long as it's relative, but by today's measurements, that would be a 4,000 square foot house, meaning you wouldn't be able to do that now.
Right, no, I understand.
So the one next to you that would be able to do that in the future would be greatly increased in size from what we expect.
But in your case that you just mentioned, you could have a 3,500 square foot house with a deck on the second floor and an open porch on the bottom, because if it's an open deck upstairs, it doesn't count now anyway. Basically, all of this is doing is saying, we gave you an exception of 250 square feet. Now, you know what? We like porches. We incentivize the character of Rehoboth with porches. Aesthetically, it's pleasing. Put
And
a
it gets
porch
back
there.
to what you said earlier, if you want more porch and you're limited by the coverage, then you're gonna have less living space.
But you're creating houses that by today's measurements would be 3,500 to 4,000 square feet. Is that the intent?
I'm not saying that I disagree with the way this is written. It's not what I was expecting
Right.
in this code. I thought the only clarification that we were going to have with regard to anything involving a roof is that balconies that are stacked on top of each other, that balcony floor above this balcony is not a roof. That is the bottom of a balcony on the floor above. I thought that's the only conversation we had, which would be clarified in the code that, the balcony of the floor above is not a roof over the balcony on the floor below.
So you're saying you don't necessarily disagree with this, it just wasn't mentioned before, but now that it's being talked about now, what is your feeling?
I do. I guess I can see the unintended consequence that Commissioner Gay is mentioning.
If I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Max.
Please, please.
Historically, and we're speaking of maybe prior me, probably, prior Dom, going back to maybe Steve Cordick's interpretation. If the porch, and let's just specifically focus on the front porch right now. Let's just talk about that. If the porch were to remain with a roof on it, and only a roof, not a deck, nothing like that, then that porch could be counted as that 250 square foot credit. Now, if a certain portion of that porch were to have a deck or a living space above it, that portion below would actually count as floor area ratio now, because you've essentially covered it with living space, and the living space would be counted below it, because the way it was described to me is you could very easily convert that space into living space because it already has a roof above it. So you could convert that space and take advantage of that credit. They would obviously have to get a permit to do so. So we would cut, right.
You would not allow that.
Right, but we do have a lot of contractors that beg for forgiveness before asking for permission.
Right, right.
I don't want to say a lot, just a couple.
Yeah. No,
But if you have a porch with a deck above it, that's not counted as gross
It
floor
would
area.
be, so if there's any living space above that porch,
No, it's just an outdoor deck.
balcony,
open
a balcony.
if it was a balcony, the space below it would count, the balcony would not count.
Space below it would count.
Right.
So this 250 wouldn't even apply to that.
The porch
It would
the
not,
part
yeah,
that's
if that portion would not be counted towards the 250, it would be counted towards your floor area ratio.
Even if it's an open
Correct.
area.
So like a little a bay window outcropping on a second floor, that little bay window outcropping on the first floor would count as floor area ratio. Historically, that's how it's been.
Well, historically,
But this
so
would
we,
change that.
Yes.
yeah. I mean, we need to all be on the same page on this so there aren't any,
Right.
issues later.
Well, and that's the problem I have. I think it adds ambiguities. It doesn't take them away.
And that's in residential, it's not in
Right.
commercial, I'm speaking.
What do you see as ambiguous? What you've
We're
just
having this
said-
discussion. We have, I mean, I realize the ordinance is not final yet, but, things like saying, for example, open porches, decks, patios. I mean, I would think we'd want to make that very specific, because somebody else could come up with some other phrase. And the for example is not
Well,
limiting enough.
true.
And so that's one thing, and whether or not you want to specify a maximum size for any of those elements, lest it kind of go wild, because again, if nothing is counted that used to be counted, it's only a matter of time before buildings are going to be bigger than what is there now, than what you envision, unless you look at all aspects of the code. And all of these, I want to back up a step, because I learned some valuable things today at the budget meeting that I think may play in here. And that is, for a lot of people in the audience, we're not at the budget meeting, but it came up that there is money in next year's budget to begin a zoning rewrite, something that we've wanted for a long time, and I was very pleased to hear that those funds were there. But the funds that are in the process, and then there was also a great deal of discussion that Commissioner Schlosser brought up about process. And what we learned was that in the next budget year, the process for the zoning rewrite would involve scoping, reviewing Board of Adjustment decisions, which is one of the things that's present today, and reviewing all the definitions in our code. That's a first step. Well, if that's the first step, and we're very committed to improving our processes, then I don't know why we're doing this now. It would seem to not follow what we talked about just this morning.
Except, we said that this could be a 2 or 3 or maybe longer
Well,
year process.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, Rick's volunteered his time, right, for the next
Yeah.
year. Yeah, I agree that 3 years is, it's unfortunate if it takes 3 years. I'm kind of not as concerned about the calendar as I am the process right now, because I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, I think that we're trying to give relief on this balcony situation that for most all of us sitting up here thought we didn't make any sense. That's why we're doing this. Now, if you object about the porches, that's something else, but that's why I thought we were sitting up here.
Maybe, and also the subsurface parking is a situation we're trying
Right.
to take care of as well.
Right.
Maybe would it work, and Glenn, for you, if you go into there on line 52, I think it is, where it says height is less than 6 feet, comma, subsurface parking areas, comma, and outdoor areas, including, for example, open porches up to 250 square feet, decks, patios, balconies, and pergolas? Would that?
Well, the only thing I'm
I'd
struggling
get
with,
rid of, for example.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's where I thought you were going to go.
Yeah, I'd get
I
rid
think
of that.
it is very
I
clear.
understand,
Define
not
it.
trying to box in, but what other options would there be other than the ones that we have listed here?
yeah, and I.
Because we don't think of them today doesn't mean somebody won't think of them.
No, but if they're limited to
Well,
this.
Oh, if they're limited, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Right,
because
right,
what I'm
right.
saying, I'm agreeing
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah,
taking
yeah.
out, for
Yeah, yeah.
example, because it's not an endless list
Right,
of
exactly.
opportunity.
Right.
I think it could be, and to be honest with you, I mean, when the Board of Adjustment made its determination about these outdoor areas, we started getting photographs of like concrete areas around pools that had small railings. Is that to be counted as gross floor area? That was a question. I mean, so there's a lot of them. I thought the idea was to clarify that any outdoor space not contained within the exterior walls of the building, because remember, the definition of gross floor area says that space contained by the exterior walls. So I thought the purpose was to clarify that outdoor spaces do not equate to gross floor area.
Right.
But if you want to, because you have specific examples in mind now, to clarify just those limited few things, rather than clarifying that all outdoor spaces do not count as gross floor area, that's another direction to go. But the intention of the way this was written was to clarify that all outdoor spaces, because they're not contained by exterior walls of a structure, would not be counted as
But
gross
then
floor
again,
area.
the concrete pad around a pool with a security fence to protect people from drowning would count towards the coverage of the lot.
Sure.
But it's not a living space. So, I mean, again, I think it fits into this definition. It's not excluded, but I guess I would defer to Matt to say, if we were to take out the, for example, and you had those other examples, would you and your colleagues be able to make the interpretation on the kind of the combing around a swimming pool and those types of things?
I think that's an unfortunate result from the current interpretation, is that if you do have a pool with a railing around it, it does count as floor area ratio. I don't think that's correct. I think it would be counted as lot coverage and lot coverage only.
Right.
And so the definition, if we take out, for example, and we say including open porches, decks, patios, balconies, and pergolas, you're good with that? You don't see any issue with that per se?
I may question pergolas because you are creating a roof structure above a patio or a porch or a deck. It is a roof structure. It is not completely open to the air. There is something up there, so I may be careful with a pergola.
But an open porch is also
so is an
open
open
to the
porch.
air with a roof, right?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So an open porch is also open to the air, but it also has a roof.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with you,
So to me,
yes.
that the pergola would be fine, as long as it fit within lot coverage. And I think of a pergola not necessarily on top of a porch, but in your yard somewhere. And so
Not heated.
it's no longer, it's not counted against FAR, but it's going to be counting against the lot coverage.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
climate control.
Right.
Yeah, I always question the kind of ruling on pergolas myself. I've always held that it is a roof structure, but some clarification is definitely warranted for sure.
But it's totally open on the outside, so
Right.
But again, if you were going to kind of make it a non-pergola, you'd have to get a permit to do that. And that wouldn't pass.
Correct.
The judgment on that, so. And because it's more ornamental.
It is.
Right.
I think I'm feeling more comfortable with this now. It's just not initially what I was expecting by our conversation. And I think I'm feeling more comfortable with it after thinking about it more. But then I want to hear from the public.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this will have to go to public hearing, so I'm sure you'll hear plenty from the public once it's in its final form.
I recall, I hate to actually bring this up, but I feel like I have to. In our original conversation on this and in listening to some of the Board of Adjustment hearings regarding this topic, I thought one of the issues was we didn't have a good definition of wall, and so that was open to interpretation. So I think if we define wall, which again, I'm just, the definitions I just came up with from the dictionary, right? I mean, a continuous vertical brick or stone structure that encloses or divides an area of land. That seems to me that would give even more clarity to this if we defined wall and defined it in that way. Would it or would it not? I defer to you. But
I thought through
that
some of
was
that, but if you have a swimming pool with 8-foot walls around it with no roof, that definition of wall, does that space get counted? If you had brick walls on every side of your swimming pool, but no roof over those walls, does that interior space where the pool is get counted?
This is why I was scared to bring this up. So, but we did talk about whether or not we needed to define wall, because that was the basis of at least one of the disapprovals. The basis, right?
Yes, it was the basis, that's right.
I don't understand that example totally, but.
Exterior covered wall? Would that make it easier?
Well, I thought through things like, walls of spaces that are not open to any outdoor air, so that you'd have to have a roof in that instance. But I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it.
Maybe something that says walls that contain conditioned space, because you're heating and cooling those, and maybe that defines the area that you would.
Exterior wall is a wall that encloses conditioned space.
Habitable space where you sleep. And
Conditioned habitable.
Climate controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Say condition, that's.
I'd have to be in big trouble to have to be out there, but.
Maybe you could just look at that. I don't know if we have to solve
mean,
it
I
now.
guess
And I only threw out some definition I read
Well,
through a search, but that seemed to be one of the big issues and areas of ambiguity. But Matt, if you don't think so, and Glenn, you don't think so.
No, I think it's a good suggestion. I'm just looking now at line like 50 in the definition of gross floor area. The sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of a building measured from the exterior faces of the exterior walls enclosing living space. You could insert, or from the center line of, and this goes on to other stuff, but that would help clarify that it's walls that enclose living space. Matt, is that a helpful suggestion?
Conditioned habitable or conditioned living space, I think, would be important.
Well, so how does that relate to a
Climate
commercial
control.
property that's not living? I mean, how would you, if it's not
I think that's why I use the word habitable rather than
habitable?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, habitable is better.
Because habitable, typically in your world, right, it means places where,
I could put people in it.
right, you're heating and cooling and.
Right.
Well, wasn't the issue that the city interpreted the posts around a railing to be
a
a
railing.
wall? So that's what I'm trying to address, is that problem.
Right,
But I
Because,
think
so
I
a
think what
railing
Matt
doesn't
said
enclose
does that.
habitable space.
What's that?
A railing doesn't enclose habitable space.
okay,
So I
okay, so
think
that had solved that problem.
I think so.
Okay, all right.
It sort of does, in the sense that it's gathering space.
I know,
You know, what's the difference between habitable space, I mean,
And living.
habitable space does have, it's a term of art. It does mean heated, cooled. I'll try to get it
does,
for you. It means
okay,
heated, yeah,
okay.
in your world, right, habitable, I
Yeah,
understand it.
it does, but it can also mean porches, balconies and things
Well, then
like
we
that.
need to
That's a
find the right,
habitable
we need to
space.
find the right
yeah.
Yeah.
language.
We need to find a term,
include-
right?
Climatized space or something like that.
For the next draft we bring back to you, because I presume I'm bringing back a draft at the workshop, we'll try to find the language that makes clear that it's space where you are heating and cooling and living and not, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so Ann, can you put further discussion on this, on the next workshop? And then, can you also, do we have enough time to schedule a public hearing for the 21st meeting? Less than 30 days, I mean, more than 30 days. Or could we do that? We have a need a resolution, don't we? Yeah.
Resolution to set the public hearing?
You should. I don't, do you have any other meetings between now and the next, yeah?
Seventh.
9th.
10th.
10th, actually.
February
Yeah,
10th.
10th is next.
We could have a meeting, set a resolution the 10th, but then we could still have to have 30 days. Right?
You'll have to have the dates to,
So, March. I mean, I'd like to hear from the Board of Adjustment on this. I'd like to even, I don't want to put you on the spot, Rick. I'd love to hear what the planning, I mean, it seems like all major zoning changes that have come up in the past have come to us through the Planning Commission. Why would we, we're not experts at zoning. I mean, Matt is, and you know, I want to take all he's saying into account, but I'm not hearing that this is any more definitive with what we already have, which is not definitive at all. That's the problem.
Well, the issue, Susan, I think, is that right now, the way this is being interpreted based on a ruling from, this is, I mean, I'm not just saying to you, but why I think this actually does need to go forward, is that right now, based on the interpretation and the ruling, every single home with a deck is now out of compliance.
It has a covered, but only covered decks, right?
No,
Not with the
every
current
single
interpretation.
deck.
The current interpretation
know,
would say
so-
anything with a railing around it would
Okay.
count.
That's a pretty big implication for this city, so it seems to me that we need to address this and solve this because of the widespread,
And once we get an
impact.
updated version, we can send it out to the Planning Commission, we can send it to the Board of
Yeah,
Adjustment.
Sure, and they can provide comment.
Yeah, I just, fine tuning, if anything, if nothing else.
Yeah, they can still have,
Absolutely.
have 30 days to
Yeah,
take
we've
a
got
look at.
2 months before we can even touch this.
Right, that's right.
I think Rick has
So
a
is that enough,
comment.
Ann? So Ann, if you can, go ahead, Rick. If you can put this on the next workshop for discussion, and then on the 21st, we can have a vote, a resolution for a meeting March 21st. Does that sound all right? Set up a resolution? I will, yes. By the 21st of February?
I will, yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, Rick.
Yes, Rick Perry, Chair of the Planning Commission. Couple things. One, I'm glad that Commissioner Schlosser raised the issue of exterior walls because that was the root problem and the root cause that started this whole issue. And so I do believe that you need a very clear definition of what constitutes an exterior wall. And there are many resources, professional resources, available that clearly define what constitutes an exterior wall. And everything I've looked at clearly suggests it is not a railing. So I think that very key issue needs to be absolutely clear. The other thing in section 1B, Commissioner Gay is well aware of this, as a lot of us are, and some of these are issues that the Planning Commission identified months and months ago as very problematic, and in some cases, frankly, idiotic. And I hate to see provisions of our code amended piecemeal. I just don't think that's the right way to do it. As Commissioner Gay indicated, yes, gross floor area is used in different ways for different reasons. But this particular provision in B of including anything over 12 feet twice makes absolutely no sense because we have height limitations, and you also have to recognize no one's living in an open space that's, say, 13 feet above the floor of your your dining room. I mean, that is simply ridiculous. And I don't know how it ever made its way into our code, but in my view, it certainly doesn't belong there. And now is the time, when you're dealing with this, to address that ridiculous provision as well. The other thing is, I have a question, because I may have misinterpreted what I heard Matt say, that a porch, which would be an open porch, and the roof serves as a deck for a second floor. I thought I heard Matt say that that made that porch below part of gross floor area.
That's what he said.
That is what he said.
And I don't think.
Well then, if you take out the 250 square foot exception, my house becomes non-conforming now, because I have a screened-in porch, but off my office, over the porch, is a small balcony deck with a railing, and off my master bedroom is a balcony deck, whatever you want to call it, that has a railing. So under that interpretation, you just converted my entire first floor porch.
No.
I don't
Why
think
not?
that.
He was given a historical interpretation.
Well,
that this
that's
would
what
help
I want. That's
fix,
what I want
that
to be
this would
clear
help
about.
fix.
That's a
That-
current interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, but this would change that interpretation.
Actually, the current interpretation is anything with a railing around it
Okay,
is,
but,
right.
okay.
And so that's why we're talking about this.
The point is
I'm still not clear.
The point here is to exempt decks, balconies, porches, period.
Everything.
Well, that's fine if you're exempting the deck or the deck itself.
Yeah.
Right.
But if the interpretation is that the existence of that deck converts the porch below it,
No, there's nothing, there could be an.
I thought that's what I heard.
Well, that was the previous way it was interpreted, but this language.
Under the
changed
current,
that.
under
Previous,
the
right.
current, yeah.
Okay, but that's not how it will be interpreted under this new revised code provision.
And that's why we're looking for guidance from the
Okay,
commission.
it's not clear to me anyways.
None of these things, the concern I have is that none of these things would count in revision. And my example about ending up with a 4,000 square foot house. I don't know if that's the intention.
And I would have a different reaction if we didn't already have the lot coverage limitation. Because, so you can't say, okay, I want to have a 10-foot porch, but that would also extend the lot coverage or add to the lot coverage, which is already bound by other dimensions. Right. And so that's why I also like what Rick said about the Section 1B, is that, again, you're going to be limited by lot coverage, so it's not like you can say, I'm going to have the first X number of feet of my house have a 12-foot cathedral ceiling, which gives me the option of building deeper into the lot to get up to the whatever the gross foot area is.
So,
Thinking this scenario.
Commissioner Gay, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible to get the 5,000 square foot house with the.
4,000.
4,000
Not
square
5,000,
foot house
4,000.
with the screen porch and,
Why not?
I mean, I think if you do the math,
No, it's not, it would be a 2,000 square foot footprint. 2 floors of a
Okay.
2,000 square foot footprint is 4,000,
right,
okay? And part of it would be porch, because by the FAR, you could only do 3,000 as habitable living area, right? FAR of 0.6. But if none of these other things count, you could have a double-decker porch, and there's your 4,000, under the current way we define.
but still, I mean, lot coverage should play a part in this.
Oh, it absolutely does, but also, we've been talking this whole time, I think it's one of the big ironies here, is we've been talking this whole time about how this affects residential, when the issues that have come before us are commercial.
They
And-
applied it to residential.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just saying that the issues that have come up have been commercial, and again, unintended consequences. I'm assuming that this means that the hotels could have a rooftop deck. Well, that was one of the things mentioned for the Bellhaven, and that would no longer count, right, this rooftop deck. But it currently counts. ClearSpace had a rooftop deck on theirs too, and there are many elements there, and I feel like that the 250 square foot provision was put in 15 years ago. I mean, no, actually, it was put in 14 years ago, 2006, as an incentive. And if we're going to allow all of these things now, I think we're in an environment where we need to also be looking at what we want. I mean, when you have an incentive, you want to get something for that. So in this day and age, if you have a flat-roofed hotel, which is the only way you can have flat roofs here, and you don't require some of that upstairs decking to be green roof, then we've missed an opportunity for an incentive as well as for a control.
I would agree with that. We want to be able to promote the green roofs, gives there some sort of incentive to do that.
Right. And so to me, that's what an open deck, a rooftop deck would be, is an incentive to have it be a green roof, not that it be gathering space for, hundreds of people. And also remember that you don't have a limitation on lot coverage for many commercial developments. It's 100% lot coverage, and hotels are obviously limited, but if they have first floor commercial space, then they're not as limited. So the lot coverage, again, we're talking residential when some of the impact of this would be commercial. Just pointing that out.
We're going to continue to discuss this anyway, so it gives us a lot to think about.
What I would like to ask you all to think about too is, as Rick Perry mentioned on section 1B, take a look at that 12 feet. And while we're in here, if there's some thoughts on that, because other than Rehoboth, I've never heard of something like that in a community. I mean, I know what they're trying to do is cut off bulk, but I mean, should that be more like 15 feet or 16 feet? Because I don't think somebody with a 12-foot ceiling, or as he said, nobody's going to have a 13-foot ceiling and say, hey, that 1,000 square foot room is now going to be 2,000 square feet of gross floor area. But it's something to think about. I'm not saying we definitely change it, but something to think about since we've got a lot of time to discuss this. Anything further? Anybody? If not, that's all of our new business, our old business. Any commissioner comments?
I have a comment. Kevin is still here. I want to thank Kevin and some of his team for recently installing a silent policeman on State Road and Hickman and Canal. We've been talking about the need for greater public safety along some areas of State Road. And I think this is a wonderful first step toward taking a look at how we can slow down traffic. Our city directs bicycle traffic to and from the beach along that route, and yet State Road, people feel that they're just coming off Route 1 or going on to Route 1, and they don't feel that it's a pedestrian zone. And so this is going to go, I think, a long ways in terms. So thanks to Billy Maffey, Mike Petterman, Sharon, your team, Chief Banks, for all coming together and taking a look at what can be done, at least in this interim, until we get DelDOT on board. And I noticed in the budget that we've deferred, around $50,000 into the next year. Hopefully we can get a crosswalk there with ADA compliant curbs on the west side and really do what needs to be done for public safety there, for pedestrians and bicycle riders. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? If not, future meeting dates, just a reminder, we've got our workshop at 9 o'clock on the 10th of February, and then at 1 o'clock on our next budget meeting. And then the 21st, which is a Friday, we have a 10 a.m. budget meeting and a 3 p.m. regular meeting. Any citizen comment? Going? Go ahead, please. Come on. If you can go over here, this microphone's, that one would be great. You give your name and address, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Jeffrey Good. I'm at 1 Grove Street. And I have a few comments, not exactly a specific issue per se, but it leads to many issues. And maybe I could start by giving a little parable or story that's true. There's a town in Austria called Hallstatt. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's been in the newspapers quite a bit recently. And they're famous. They haven't been famous for hundreds and hundreds of years. They're a small town, almost the same size as Rehoboth Beach. It's located in Upper Austria in the Alps. And it's a real beautiful town. And I haven't been there personally, but I've seen pictures. And it's by a river, and the Alps, the mountains are in the background. And the people there the residents there had a wonderful life, quality of life. Things were relatively easy. And everything changed in 2013. In 2013, for those who have kids or go to the movies a lot, the movie Frozen came out. And Frozen is it's located in a town that's supposed to represent Hallstatt. And ever since this movie came out in 2013, this small town of less than 1,000 people received 3,500 tourists a day, over 1 million a year. This is from 2013 till now. And it got to a point where this wonderful little town with great quality of life, great environment, easy to get around, was totally changed. And the residents were very upset, obviously, and they appealed, of course, to their government. And what the government did was a little draconian. What they just started this year, they basically, since this is Austria, it isn't so much automobile traffic, it's mostly bus and public transportation. They put a limit on how many tourists from the 3,500 a day, 1 million plus a year, they put an exact limit on how many tourists could come into town. There was supposedly, the limit now is 53 busloads of tourists each day. And it's not like I'm asking that we should put a limit on the number of tourists that come into Rehoboth Beach every day. Not at all. But I'm trying to point out to you guys who control the city the difference in philosophy between what that city management did and what you guys tend to be doing. They listened to their residents. They tried to accommodate them the best they can, and they put their priorities first. Unlike, okay, I'm most familiar, the part of Rehoboth Beach, we've owned property here since 2006, but we've only lived here since a couple years ago, and the area I'm most familiar with, and I'm sure the other areas of Rehoboth are similar, is the Circle area. And it's hard to explain how bad that Circle is. Maybe this will help. I've been in foreign service and in the UN for a good part of my career, a good part of it overseas. And I've been in countries, I lived in Egypt for 3.5 years, a very poor, underdeveloped country, and their circles were 10 times better than our circle. And I'm not exaggerating. There isn't a 5 minutes that goes by without one car honking another car in that circle. And instead of coming up with all sorts of ideas, everyone has great ideas, but there doesn't seem to be any bad ideas. There's no idea that's so poorly thought of that you don't decide to foister on the residents. We have at the Circle, where I live, we have a farmer's market. You're proposing a new boat dock. You're proposing to put clear space. You're proposing to put shuttle buses coming by to 10 o'clock at night, it's going to become a congested, almost unlivable area in the summer. So my request is, instead of coming up with all these great new ideas, everyone has a pet project, if you have extra money to spend, try to improve the infrastructure of this town, which you are in some areas. I don't know what you could do with that circle, for example, but someone should be able to design it so not every second car doesn't give the right of way to the cars going around the circle. So that's just one example. So that's basically what I had to say. Just have a different philosophy, a better balance between the needs to keep the businesses and the tourists going versus the needs of the people who are actually living here. They had that balance in Hallstatt and they changed it around. I'm not asking that far, but have a better balance to make, I mean, from 2006 to now, Rehoboth Beach isn't getting better, it's getting worse. So that's my spiel to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I think.
Patty Brown, One State Road. I have a couple questions. First of all, the FAR thing, okay? I've got a backyard 2-bed block. Is that considered?
No.
Being taken away? And then I've got a front porch that I have put railings on. There's like an overlap. That isn't. Okay, now for the circle. Why don't you, I mean, they're coming around that circle. They're not yielding to us. One day I went across the street, I almost got hit. There was an accident. Car stopped, so the other car hit her. Can't there be like a yield light instead of the sign put there so it slows that down as they come in and going out?
There are with blinking red around them. Sometimes people see it, some people don't.
Maybe they need to read it.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Following the rules, there's no substitute.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Glenn, I'm gonna need you to share.
What's that?
I'm gonna need you to share.